In sharp contrast to the Pariah River down at the White House campground outside of Kanab, Utah, I've moved up to the Fishlake National Forest near at the Elkhorn campground. And we see aspens, there's lodgepole pines, spruce, saw some wild turkey running through, and a variety of wildflowers in the area. Very music, with the exception of the meadow over there and this cute little stream that was running through the campground that ended up being a spring head that we are going to talk about today. What caught my eye was this very large fence around the area in this entire meadow where the spring is, and they put the spring box down here, and there's still adequate flow coming out to keep a consistent and stable flow for the system. Right here at the spring head, I've already noticed a couple of grass species in here, particularly we'll notice jungus over here, very indicative of wetlands. We have some purple asters in here as well, and this is our spring head. So let's go take a look at what this system actually supports. One of the important things to know about springs is that a spring is literally the point of groundwater discharge. It is the source of all the water for this local ecosystem that we're going to be looking at today. And as you'll notice, the flow of the system is very stable and low energy compared to the Pariah River, which was a very sediment-laden system. And the cattle scat here, so I changed my mind about elk. Notice we have clover, more grasses, and some wetland-loving flowers here. I'm unsure of the name. Compared to some of the other system we've seen the grazing of the cattle here on the grass, very indicative of grazers in the area, and again, a low energy system. In addition to the cattle scat that we saw there, I noticed this imprint here, which kind of similar to elk, but was much deeper due to the weight ratio of adult cattle versus elk. But this area was grazed fairly well in here. As might be expected, that grazing was on the outside of the cattle guard right there. Moving into the inside of the campground, we'll continue on and see how far the little stream goes. And again, just noticing the aspens, the blue spruce, and the variety of pines up in the alpine area that we are. As we can see, additional hoof marks. So on the inside of the cattle guard, the cattle got through, which they may have brought them in. And I want to point out, this is a biofilm in here. Let's take a little bit closer look at this. And if you're ever out and you see something that looks like an oil sheen, if you go touch it, if it's petroleum based, it will reseal. However, this is a biofilm, and when touched will shatter. That way you know what it is. Its presence indicates a degree of geochemical and hydrological stability in a system. Continuing on down, we continue to see the cattle pressure in the area. Notice the soil types in this area, how dark and rich and organic it looks. If you're here walking, you can smell the organics in the soil as you walk through the system. And the general width of this system here was maximum 10 feet in the widest areas, and generally limited to 3 to 4 feet. The channel itself was about 4 inches deep and 4 to 5 inches wide. Notice here how much saturation there is in the soils by the stream versus the upland topography there, with the different types of grasses noticed on the left-hand portion of the screen. And moving along, we can see the grass was really grazed down through here, a lot of the cattle pressure. However, flow is still consistent and stable through here. One of the unique challenges with overgrazing or just grazing in general is soil compaction and the potential of creating hummocks. As we continue on down through the stream, we notice that it becomes a little more channelized in the lower area. Grasses are still here and grazed. As the channel starts to dig in a little bit, this is where it kind of stays at about 4 to 6 inches wide and about 6 inches deep. And now we're noticing one of my other favorite wetland species is the infamous willow. I was looking for browsing pressure on there, and it looked like some of the young shoots may have been browsed at one time, so potentially mule deer or cattle, if they browse on tender shoots of willows. And while we do have stable and consistent flow, the wetted width of this riparian zone is not very wide. As we can see, the upland's soil type changes drastically just a few feet away from the creek. And lower in the system here, we can see as it pans out, the width tends to increase a little bit. The large stand of willows there in the background is very positive. And we continue down, grazing continues. There's still pressure from cattle down in here, but we still have water. We have willows and other wetland and riparian species. As we look at browsers and grazers, the variety of plants that are in the system, wetlands and facultative wet, the willows, I think was showing some indication of predation on those. And can't forget to stop to look at the cool spider webs, because location, location, location for that guy. And we're going to notice our first nick point here, and as the channelization increases, notice that the flow is getting faster and it's channelizing more, and the wetted area of the riparian zone becomes significantly less. And continuing on down, following the small creek from the spring head, the channelization begins to get a little bit deeper and eventually dies off here in this little aspen grove. And it's at this point that the creek that was formed by the spring dies back underground, and we can see that point right here where the water just sort of stops. And moving further down, I noticed that the surface water influence was starting to increase, so when it would rain, this creek would start to flow more, but we do have that stable and consistent spring flow that wets that entire area down to where I had indicated. And at this point, the creek becomes an intermittent creek. Overall, this was a really nice system, other than some of the cattle pressure that I had observed. I believe this would be a unique opportunity for a local watershed group or conservation group to maybe come in, and if they wanted to, work with some very low impact style following Zadig's designs to increase the width of that wet meadow in there. And obviously the Forest Service here at Fishlake National Forest would appreciate any help and collaboration efforts. And that's what I've got for the Elkhorn campsite. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this, and drop a comment if there's more information you'd like to add.